Okay, welcome back to the Bitcoin SV Train channel. This is John, and today I've got Kurt Wuckert Jr. of Crypto Traders Pro back. Although it's not really back, is it? I think the last time I spoke to you it was for MetaNet TV.
I believe it was. Yeah, I don't think I've been on an SV Train episode yet, but I'm glad to be here, John.
They're very similar, I'm told.
Yeah. The main feature is exactly the same.
Well, originally there was no difference at all. I think it was just the logo at the bottom of the screen that was different. Then I worked on other things like changing the color and the style, that kind of thing. But yep, it is basically the same thing. At least when I'm doing them too. We want other people doing MetaNet TV videos as well, which will be different. So how have you been?
I'm good. Overtired. I've got a 6-week-ish old son who is he's a bit of a night owl, and normally I would be too, but not if I don't get sleep on one end of the spectrum. So that's been a trial, but it's been great. He's a great kid. My only complaint is the sleeplessness, but we're otherwise rocking and rolling, having a good year at the Wuckert household.
Yeah, definitely been there, done that. But thankfully, it's long in the past. Well, not that long actually. You got a lot of fun to go yet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it really only 6 weeks?
Roughly. He was born July 26th, so something like that. Yeah, two and a half months. He might be a little shy of 6 weeks actually. No. So it'd be 10 weeks. My bad.
Yeah, it feels like longer than that. I mean, in a way, I feel like we're kind of all invested in this project because you've been putting him on chain, you've been posting updates, memifying him, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a conversation today across Twitter because my wife brought it up and was like, I put pictures on social media too, but maybe we shouldn't make him the subject of a meme. And so it's been something I've been grappling with, because I was like, to me, I'm like, well, he's adorable, let's put him up there. And I don't know, she's probably right. He should have some privacy until he can make his own decisions. But I don't know. I still think he's cute, and I like the memes.
Well, I actually video recorded my son's birth. No, that was kind of controversial. I mean, everyone thought it was great at the time, and to be honest, my wife and her mother love watching it. But when I showed it to my son himself, like, he was totally unimpressed.
Yeah, it could be a lot. I guess it depends on but even I think, man, regardless of maturity, I feel like that's a tough one.
I figured that very few people in the world, like, or who will exist, will get the chance to see themselves being born. So that's true. That was a unique experience that he could have. But I guess maybe he has to be a little bit older to appreciate it.
How old is he?
He's 8.
Yeah, 8 might be a little early to get the gravity of the situation.
True. Yeah, I figured that too. I totally was not expecting to show it to him before he was a teenager, at least. Actually, even a teenager is probably not a great idea. Not sure I would have wanted to watch that.
Yeah, no, I'd wait till like 26.
Yeah, or maybe even like 40 or 50.
Let all those hormones calm down a little bit, get through some of that growing up baggage, and then he might be able to appreciate such a thing.
Yeah, the angle is very tasteful. It's shot like from the head looking towards the wall.
Sure. So it's not National Geographic.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever dealt with 8-year-old boys, they like anything that's like gross and disgusting. So his main complaint that it was not disgusting enough.
Okay.
Like he was expecting more, like horrible noises and like blood, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the part he was unimpressed by.
He should have seen Ronan being born. He was an emergency C-section, and it was a whole event. So I watched the whole thing myself, and I'm not squeamish, but it was an adrenaline-inducing moment in my life, to say the least.
I am kind of squeamish, and I'm not sure I could have dealt with that.
It was, so they put up a privacy screen so I can't see, right? But they drop the screen once the baby comes out. Well, mid-operation, the privacy screen falls down, and I get to watch the doctor elbows deep into my wife's abdomen. It was like a horror movie. It was quite honestly the most intense thing I've ever seen. So
yeah, I can totally imagine that.
Yeah, there was a lot going on there.
I take it you weren't chuckling at the time.
No, I was trying my damnedest to be strong for my wife, but I was a little bit worried I was going to lose my cool completely. So
yeah,
it was very much an exercise in self-discipline.
It's it's kind of tough to know what to do in the delivery room when you're a man, because like on the one stage you want to be there, you want to be supportive, but on the other hand, you're totally like irrelevant to the situation, apart from just holding hands.
Right.
So you're just sort of running around trying not to get in people's way and just
basically
generally not annoying people. So yeah,
that's what I said about it at the event. Actually, I said I feel like a spectator at a sporting event, and like the game kind of spills into my seat every once in a while, right? Like the players will tackle themselves into me, and then now I need to react. But yeah, holy cow.
yeah. Well, that's why it's been interesting to watch it all back on video and see how my memory of it compares to what actually happened. And I think things that I thought took a long time, like the part between when the baby was born and when he starts crying, like that seemed to go forever when I was there in the room.
Yeah.
But when I watch it back on the video, it's like a second or two.
Sure.
So I think that time must have dilated, so to speak. Well, enough about all that kind of thing, because I did kind of bring you here to talk about Bitcoin stuff. Although there's it's not necessary to restrict it to that, because you're on Twitter a lot, and you've always got something to say about Bitcoin, and I find my problem is there are days, sometimes like up to 3 days at a time, where I got nothing to say whatsoever about Bitcoin. How do you deal with those days and stay interesting?
Honestly, the difficult thing about it is like I'm critical. I feel like maybe even to a fault that I like to debate. So even if the sun is shining on everything, I might just dig into my little tool belt of things that are pet peeves or just little things that can be improved. And I don't know if that's like if there's some kind of title personality trait that you can give that or something. They got like the what do you call it? The Briggs-Myers test or whatever you can take to figure out who you are as a person or whatever.
I think I scored a 50-50 on everything on that.
Yeah. Well, some of that stuff is like, well, how do you feel when you take the test, right?
Yeah.
People are, wow, well, that's how I behave because XYZ. So, but neither here nor there. I am somewhat of a contrarian, even on a great day. And I try to keep things positive, but I do like to be critical. So rather than, my dear friend Ari from Shark Pool and Cash Pay, who likes to call everyone economic retards, I think is a word that he likes to use. I would be much more likely to come up with a way to nudge people in the right direction as to how I feel about things.
Yeah, economic retards. While it is a great term in some situations, it's not probably not persuasive. I mean, it's debatable. Yeah, it's not the way I communicate. So if I were to be using terminology like that, I would be less effective that way because I would be playing out of character. But yeah, honestly, I can almost always come up with something. And frankly, if I don't have a passion about Bitcoin, I will just tune out. I'll just be done for the day or two or three. And I guess it's a good thing that people don't notice and feel like I'm always there anyways. But it does seem like that. Like I've been sleeping at odd hours, and they're even when I'm awake at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, it's just the same people seem to be there chatting. And I think maybe it's true. Maybe people don't sleep at all.
Well, in this season of my life, I basically take 2-hour naps every 2 hours, 24 hours a day. So there's not really a day or night that I get a block of sleep usually. So very much, I'm having a lot more communication with my Australian and East Asian friends than typical.
Well, that should put you in good stead, because I think the impression I got at CoinGeek Soul was that about 60 or 70% of all people in Bitcoin SV are from Australia somewhere.
That's fascinating. And maybe that's Craig's fault, but what do you think? Is there another ingredient to that?
When I asked, a few of them did cite, the fact that Craig Wright is from Australia. My theory was always that Australians are not as triggered by Craig Wright as people from other countries. Like,
that's fair.
I know a lot of people who, they don't disagree with what he says, but it's just the way he says it, the very sort of brusque way he says it. And I think if you're an Aussie, and especially if you're an Aussie who's ever dealt with people in the IT department, you're probably totally used to that kind of language and that kind of personality.
Sure.
So it's not unusual.
Yeah, seems like the local boys blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, there could be a kind of national pride thing to go with it too.
Yeah, that's fair. I like it.
I've not lived in Australia for about 20 years now, so maybe the culture there is different to what I remember. But I think it's the kind of place where people would have supported it. Because it's Australian.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'm from the most jingoistic country in in the West, anyways. But I can't tell you how many Americans just like things because they're American, even when they're not really American, which is something that fascinates me. But it's an interesting little bit there where it's like, that's our guy, that's our team, these are our values, and it's like, I don't know that we actually have any of that in common, but okay.
Possibly, yeah. Have you been to Canada?
Briefly a couple times, like long weekends or a business trip, but I've not spent a lot of time in Canada.
All right, yeah. That's I used to live in Toronto as well, a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
And that was also a while ago too. But I realized that in Canada, people who live there can tell you every famous person who's ever come from Canada, everything that was ever invented in Canada. And they have this mental list, and they will tell you, like, all they need is the prompt, and they'll run through the list. And
fascinating.
Australians are pretty similar to Canadians. They don't speak French, but they actually neither do most Canadians, but
right.
They don't try. And
that was I went to Montreal once, and that, so I've been to Toronto, and
they
I've been to Montreal.
definitely speak French in Montreal. Yeah,
I was shocked how many people spoke absolutely no English, because
right.
People prepared me with like, there's some French going on there, like, but most people are bilingual, it'll be no problem. And there were sometimes hours of the day when I could not communicate with a single person. So Montreal really caught me a little bit off guard, that it was very, very French in many ways. So
yeah, that's kind of the line. The further west you go from the center of Montreal, the more English it gets, and the further east you go, the far, far less English it gets.
Yeah.
So there's some neighborhoods in Montreal where you will hear a lot of English, but not most of it. And they have those laws where you can't put up an English sign, or they used to anyway. When I was there.
That could be. There were certainly neighborhoods where there wasn't a lick of English anywhere. So
yeah,
I couldn't. I could barely navigate because I was not prepared. Like I said, people told me it's a bilingual city, you'll be okay. So it was like I don't even know stop, go, and like no French.
Yeah,
so
even their stop signs are in French.
Yeah,
I think I have a photo of me standing next to one of those somewhere.
Nice.
But yeah, so we touched briefly on Twitter trolling, Twitter arguing.
Yeah.
So yeah, about Twitter arguing, when I'm being trolled or trolling or arguing online, like I never know, like, am I trying to convince the person I'm arguing with, Or am I doing this like as a show for the audience? Like I'm trying to convince the neutrals who are reading this. So you're obviously not going to sway the person you're arguing with.
Sure.
Especially by calling them an economic retard. But it is possible other people will read that and say, hey, I like this guy's style. Yeah, and he has a point. And I guess in Bitcoin SV, as most of us would be fans of Craig Wright, I mean, you can hardly blame someone for being kind of direct and blunt in their Twitter arguments.
For sure.
I mean, the whole society, community, or movement was sort of founded on people doing that, so it's part of the culture, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, the issue of the week is SPV wallets. So I wanted to ask you about that. Now, I mean, ever since I read the white paper, I've had a basic understanding of what SPV was. Simplified payment verification, for the record. But sure. I guess I didn't understand, like exactly who was using it or why you would or would not use it. Do you know much about that?
I mean, historically, I don't know that SPV has actually been implemented fully almost anywhere. And
really,
I think one of the things that's interesting among software people, first of all, is that Bitcoin software is actually a very simple thing. It's the economics that people generally misunderstand, and
that's very true.
We got a bunch of software people that took the project over after Satoshi left, and software people think there's a software solution to every problem with their software, as opposed to maybe users could be taught to use the existing software differently. And so I think before anybody ever got to really tinker with what SPV was or how it worked, it just kind of got taken away. And I think the closest thing that people got to it for a good while was Electrum. And people are common with Electrum light wallets and stuff like that. But then Core, and in fact, at this point, I think Core has turned off like Bloom filters and all kinds of other things that would make SPV even function on BTC. So right there, you've got most people who are Bitcoiners in name only, who just don't even have the opportunity to test out SPV. Yeah, the Koreans or whatever we're calling them this week. But SPV is a very specific thing, and it's so narrowly utilized. It's like, I don't know, I like to liken the white paper to the US Constitution, because I think it plays well for most people. Like, you can have a conservative view of the Constitution or a liberal view of the Constitution, or you can completely reject the Constitution altogether. You can say that,
like the government does.
Precisely. Like, well, we're in charge now, so what are you going to do? Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of the exact same kind of thing with the white paper in Bitcoin, where, well, we're in charge now, and the white paper is a cute thing to talk about every once in a while, but ultimately this is the path we're on, and who are you to change it? And so it just hasn't been played with, much like, most people have not read the Constitution and therefore don't understand that you have the right to secede as an individual or as a state from the Union. And if you talk about such a thing, oh my goodness, what have you just said? You're a separatist, like you're this dangerous revolutionary. And it's, well, actually, it's written very clearly in black and white on our founding document that we claim to, everybody's walking around with "We the People" on shirts and tattoos and everything else. And
so it is in the Constitution that you can secede, is it?
Absolutely. And then it was tried, of course, in
1860. It didn't work out so well for them.
Right. Turns out it's not the process that you think. There's an economic problem with seceding without proper preparation. But
it's like leaving the European Union is supposed to be a fairly simple process too. But
why not? So, but it's all those things. There's all these consequences to every action you take. So with BTC, it just kind of got swept under the rug. What do we need SPV for? Nobody's buying simple little things. So why do we need simple payment verification? There's just no reason for it. And therefore, click it off and we're going a different direction. And there we have it. Now, 10 years later, you've got the, and to be fair, the BCH and the BSV communities trying to sort of figure out where SPV fits into the reality of, hey, we're trying to use this thing for payments. And quite clearly, a lot of people just don't even know how, or they don't have the inclination to try, because we've got 10 years of culture behind, well, I'll just fire up a node and I'll push out an API and we'll just connect it to light wallets because that's what I know as a software guy, and it's easy to deploy, and I can have my app out in 2 weeks instead of having to engineer an SPV solution and connect that SPV solution to a miner who's willing to feed the data to it. So it's it's complicated. So we're going to need a cultural shift to even really give SPV a real try. So that's I think that's the real issue that I haven't heard many people, and I don't know that I've heard anyone but myself mention it, but I posted on Twitter and I tagged all of the BSV miners, and I said, who's going to be the miner to actually give us the tools to deploy SPV? So I called here. I called for miner leadership. Yeah, if you want to pull it up or read it or whatever you got. But since then, I've seen the narrative change a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is what piqued my curiosity, because when, I realized that my own lack of understanding of SPV is not what it is or how it's supposed to work, but I didn't realize that it wasn't being widely used already. Like I just assumed that everyone who had some kind of light wallet or mobile wallet or light client was using SPV, but it seems that's not the case.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
So what are they using instead?
So I'm going to bring up Core again. The BTC people had developed a business model around firing up a listening node. So you're running the full blockchain and you're quote unquote validating the transactions with your full node. And as a business, let's say, I actually don't know this to be true, but I'm going to make an assumption here that BitPay likely has a couple of redundant BTC nodes that they are running, and they are serving out an API. And that API is connecting to their light clients and the point of sale systems and anybody else that has BitPay enabled. And rather than having a direct connection like merchant to miner, which would be more functional, more scalable, no central point of failure, they are connecting back to BitPay's node. And most times that's fine because, well, we are, we're not using Bitcoin for a lot of commerce on a day-to-day basis. So that's been okay. But we're trusting BitPay's central server. We're trusting that it doesn't go offline or anything else. And we've seen this a little bit with BSV's microtransactions. We've seen MoneyButton hit a 10,000 user scaling ceiling. We've seen Stress Test knock MoneyButton and a couple other players completely off the network. And you know what? We're only talking about 250 something megabyte blocks, and it was knocking out infrastructure. And it's because none of them were actually using SPV. They just have a node, and their node ran out of RAM, and there it is. We are offline. So, and that's not
for the record. Kurt just made that sound
experience.
Effect himself.
And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, we're young in this space, kind of. It's been 10 years, but to be fair, MoneyButton's about a year old, and Handcash and some of these other wallets and service providers and various things, and Unwriteer is another great example. He's got Planaria and all of the other things that he's put out that are utilizing his node infrastructure. We are trusting that Unwriteer has the infrastructure to serve out data and his various tools in a way that's reliable. So people are building businesses using Unwriteer's tools, which intrinsically puts you in a position where you're not relying on Bitcoin for uptime. You are relying on Unwriteer for uptime. And that's a different relationship, but it's not the relationship people are being sold. And I think that's a crucial thing for people to understand.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, at some stage, I think Unwriteer is going to have to tell everyone who he or she is, just so people can have a better idea, whether to trust them or not.
Sure,
that's it.
And I think that's
a tricky
coming.
thing that's been part of Bitcoin since the start.
Yeah, I have a feeling in about a year, Unwriteer will be a public figure.
Yeah, and a few people have met him already. So
yeah. So far the NDAs are holding up, though.
Damn it. These people should work in the media. They should know the NDAs.
Right.
I think breaking an NDA is like doing a 51% attack. You can do it, but if you're going to do it, you better make it worthwhile, because you can only do it once and never again.
Absolutely.
So
gotta be worth it.
So yeah, I guess I just wasn't aware that there were alternatives to using SPV. I just assumed that everyone was using it already. And when I saw your tweet, which I'm just gonna throw up there on the screen again, you were talking about offering SPV services. So I mean, what would that even look like?
Well, I mean, it can look like a lot of things. I think, frankly, we're not sure what a lot of it would look like. A lot of what Unwriteer is offering actually is something that would likely work better being served directly from miners, for example. So, BitDB, Planaria, and some of these other tools, which, again, are brilliant. Like, Unwriteer deserves the utmost amount of praise for creativity and for filling in a gap that miners have left open, by the way. So, but I think we could be looking at SPV service looking a lot like Unwriteer's tools, which actually puts him in a precarious situation for, if he's invested a lot in infrastructure, he's competing in a niche that may go away. And that would be, it puts him in a precarious situation, just financially and fundamentally. Yeah, I've seen it said this way, and this is not my words precisely, but I think it's a really great analogy. And I believe it was Ari, Sharkpool Ari again, who said that Unwriteer's tools are very much like AOL. In that, and again, it's everybody from our vantage point goes, "Ooh, that's rough." But here's the thing. In 1995, AOL was an absolutely 100% necessary stepping stone to getting people on the internet.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I actually remember those times.
Right. And to be fair, for millions of people, AOL was the internet, and they did not understand that they were allowed to function outside of this AOL ecosystem.
That's
and
right.
So I think it's a really crucial thing to understand there, is that from 2019, AOL is like, it's absolutely toxic. But at the time, it's literally the thing that brought the internet to most people in the Western world. Mm-hmm. And so to say that Unwriteer's tools are AOL is both a compliment and it's a criticism. And there's a roadmap there that says you can be that stepping stone, but you better have the next stepping stone figured all the way out, or all of a sudden there's going to just be a generational shift and you are gone. And, so that's where that opportunity really resides, that miners can provide Unwriteer services faster, cheaper, and more reliable. They just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that's the part I find curious.
Well, they haven't had the opportunity to, because culturally, Bitcoin's just been ruined. And 10 years of garbage economics from people that understand software but don't understand people, and they understand how to create problems and they don't understand how to solve them like a businessman, is given us this Bitcoin culture that is just completely and utterly dysfunctional in the real world, which is why Bitcoin doesn't interface with the real world. We don't interface with the real economy, and we're just barely starting to scratch the surface. in all the ways that, I mean, you watch any video about Bitcoin from 7 or 8 years ago, and it was commerce and business opportunities and programmable money and all that. And we still are barely doing any of that stuff. But the main culture of Bitcoin is, well, we've succeeded. It's digital gold. We're all rich now. And
yeah,
it's a paper tower. And yes, many people are very, very wealthy from early Bitcoin investment, but they've not created anything external. They haven't created anything that pushes value out from Bitcoin into the economy. It's all about the economy spilling value into Bitcoin. And, you know, that runs out if there's no reciprocity. And as of yet, I'd say the reciprocity has been dismal from the Bitcoin community out to the rest of the economy. I would argue it's almost non-existent. And so then
agree.
What's the incentive, right?
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's been my main problem with the BTC, the Bitcoin core crowd for a long time now, is that they wanted to just keep it static. The solutions they built were not useful solutions yet. I mean, maybe they will be in the future, right, but they're not yet. And it overly complicated things. You know, like we don't need something like the Lightning Network.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I'm probably preaching to the choir here for anyone watching this.
Well, and then but you got to think of, like, what are the unforeseen consequences? Like, how much further along could we be if we allowed Bitcoin to scale? You know, like, let's imagine, you know, Gavin Andresen and Mike Hearn and Jeff Garzik, and those were the guys that actually pushed Bitcoin Core forward.
I often do.
I mean, it would be a completely different ecosystem. Like, imagine if the Greg Maxwells and the whoever else, your various other small blockers were laughed out of the community when they showed up, which is what I assumed would happen, by the way. But they got a foothold, and they changed it to the point where, you know, they talk about how miners are essentially their, like, slavish notary department. You know, if this was a big company, they're the board of directors, and the miners are, you know, they work in the security office, and they just are a notary stamp, and they do their job like cogs, and that's it. There's no creativity, there's no thought going into mining. It's just this written off secondary industrial process that people don't understand. And
I can see how some people would look at it like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with that, by the way. I can see how some people looking from the outside in would see, you know, this is just a commodity industry. They will do whatever's necessary just to make their money. They'll switch to whatever chain is best for them.
Right.
And we wouldn't want those people involved in the decision-making process at all.
Sure.
I mean,
well, and it's fascinating because they're doing the most work, and they're secretive because their secrets are extremely valuable. So they don't want their competitors to get them. But I mean, if you look at the Bitcoin core directors, developers versus the people that are working in research and development at, you know, even a company like Bitmain or whatever, that just gets criticized as this shack of a company that's, you know, running off of free power and Chinese gangster handshakes and whatever else Bitmain's up to. Yeah. But they're a general artificial intelligence research company, and they're doing all kinds of crazy development behind closed doors that they're not showing the rest of the world because it's too valuable to share outside of their own little circles. And we know for a fact that that's happening at most of these mining companies. I think in the SV community right now, at least the look of it is that Mempool is doing all kinds of the same kind of stuff in the background, that they're looking very deeply at really progressive miner services. So, you know, I would like to see the leadership start to come from the mining community across the entire cryptosphere, really. Yeah,
that's a good idea. To be honest, like mining, I find mining very esoteric. Like it seems every time I read something about mining, I learn something I had no idea about in the past.
Sure.
And yes, I will get trolled in the comments for admitting that there was something about Bitcoin that I don't understand fully. I'm totally prepared for that, and
God forbid, right?
it's also a technique I use to get people to like explain it in a simpler way for the people watching who don't already understand it. I mean, when we're talking here, we just assume that everybody knows what mining is like, and where it's being done, and who's doing it, and why. Is it still taking place mostly in China? That was another issue that was discussed this week.
It depends how you look at it, actually. As a function of total hash power and what people think of as your basic mining services, yes, the overwhelming majority of mining is done in China.
Yeah.
The reason why is there's very cheap subsidized power. The Chinese government has special deals with the number of players in the space, and why not? But those tend to be the commodity miners that people picture. It's what else do you do? Well, we blast out hash power, and they function at the lowest level on a daily basis. Now, like I said, they have research and development wings. They're doing all kinds of different things, via BTC and Bitmain. All these players were working on Bitcoin Cash early. They've, since the split, some things have gotten crazy with the bear markets and stuff. So I think some of that has pulled back a little bit. But when we look at specialized services, I think we actually see quite a bit more of that in Japan and Korea. I think we've seen a little bit of, like, we know SBI Group was working with some of the SV people on some research and development stuff, all of which has not been announced at all. But I've seen SBI mentioned a number of times, like researching ASIC development and other stuff, and then it just kind of never comes all the way out. But there's also quite a bit in Eastern and Western Europe. And there's a lot of research that's coming out of places like Kazakhstan and Estonia. That, again, that you don't hear these things very often, but there's a lot going on in this space that, they're looking at providing nothing but specialized services and maybe charging special fees and building unique business models in the mining space. So, and I think those things could be more valuable than just being that big commodity hasher in a dusty warehouse. Whereas, and I think that's what mostly people picture, but I think there's something to be said about a good medium-sized mining company that's providing specialized services. And if I were to give a just a simple analogy, what's talking about the difference between, like, maybe a company like Toyota that has manufacturing plants all around the earth and they pump out commodity cars all day, versus a company like, Ferrari or Tesla or somebody that, we manufacture everything in one spot, but it's the coolest place on earth and we make the coolest vehicles and nobody can compete with us because we're awesome.
Yeah.
And it's a different experience, but they both are very valuable to the automobile industry. And I think the mining industry is much the same way, but it's very quietly the same way. And hopefully it becomes a little more public.
Yeah, that's true. I was actually in Georgia last year, Georgia, the country, at the end of last year, for the record, at a Bitmain sponsored conference. And it was quite surprising to see how much activity was going on around there. Although they said it wasn't in Georgia itself, it was more in Kazakhstan and the neighboring countries.
Yeah, Kazakhstan, my understanding of Kazakhstan is that there's some old Soviet power plants that are chugging away and creating all kinds of power that people don't know what to do with. And therefore, Bitcoin works very nicely.
Kazakhstan's a fascinating place. They had, for a while there, they had nuclear weapons, spaceports, everything. They still have spaceports. And now a lot of Bitcoin mining. You wouldn't realize it's the tech center it is.
Well, people think of Borat, which is really unfair because Borat shot the Kazakhstan scenes, I think, in Romania. So, Kazakhstan is a tech center, and people have no idea if they don't have some kind of inside scoop. Yeah.
Well, I think that the biggest insult there was that I think he chose a country name that was so obscure that nobody's ever heard of it. And but people have heard of Kazakhstan, and there are actual people from there who are spreading the word about it. So they were rightly offended by what they saw.
Yeah, it's a little unfair, especially if you don't understand the type of comedy there.
I've never seen any actual Kazakhstani comedy.
I don't know that I have either. I suppose it's possible.
I'd have to see some before I make a judgment. But yes. Anyway, well, I mean, getting back to SPV and things like constitutional issues, it seems to me that Craig Wright himself and Enchain and Calvin Ayre and all of the people who are most influential in this ecosystem are recommending SPV. So if that's true, I mean, even if you don't prefer SPV as the option, like how useful is it going to be for you to go against that?
I mean, everything's a business decision.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's kind of Bitcoin's lesson, is that you can do what you want, but there are consequences. And I think the big criticism is that, again, like somebody like Handcash, for example, from a user experience, a user interface standpoint, it's a really, really, really beautiful, usable, functional wallet.
It is.
And to the point where, I mean, I'm running the giveaway that I'm doing right now on Twitter, just because I want people to upgrade the wallet and play with it and see how great it is.
I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah, we'll touch on it.
All right.
But the problem is that, again, we're still relying on the infrastructure of Handcash, the company. Like, if Handcash goes out of business, your handle's gone, and you know, like all of these different things that you've kind of invested in, and maybe you've printed signage or all kinds of things that are, hey, here's our Handcash handle, and
yeah, well,
and whatever, you know.
I actually do have that problem a little bit because I had two handles, but when they brought out the version 2.0, you need a separate phone number for each handle. So one of them is kind of inactive at the moment until I can find a new way to activate it.
Sure.
I can still send from it, but I can't send to it anymore.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a good example, is that infrastructurally, they have put themselves in a position where they are middlemen, and they've created a business model around serving transactions. I'm sure, given that they have a node in the middle somewhere, that there's an opportunity to profit on those really tiny transaction fees somewhere in there as well. You know, and again, not faulting anybody. I'm friends with Alex from Handcash, and like I said, I think it's an absolutely beautiful, in fact, I would call it the flagship wallet in the BSV space. But that doesn't mean that there are not valid criticisms to the fact that, you know, what if a company like, I don't even know, Samsung or somebody said, you know what, that's so beautiful, we're gonna put a Handcash wallet on every single new Galaxy S, 30 or whatever it is now, that's going out. Well, shoot, all of a sudden Handcash doesn't have the infrastructure to deal with that kind of onboarding issue, and it's, maybe they can take out a loan or get a VC or somebody to come in and help them build out all that infrastructure, but they only have that problem because, from a protocol standpoint, they're not utilizing SPV as the full back end of the wallet. Yeah. And there's reasons why. I understand that it's an engineering debacle, and there are not a lot of experts out there that can even do such a thing. So there's issues there, and I understand why, if Alex is only assuming he's going to get 2,000-3,000 users or something at first. Okay, here's the product. It's proof of concept. It's fully functional, but can it serve 1 million people sending around pennies to each other all day? Well, that we really don't know. And
that's a good point.
The only way to know is when it breaks. So that's
usually how I find something. It needs fixing, when it stops working.
Absolutely, and most people do. And again, it's not something to fault them on, but there is a pre-built-in solution in Bitcoin, and I think culturally the SV people look at that and say, like, we are the actual Bitcoin maximalists. Like, we are the people that believe that fundamentally Satoshi was right about Bitcoin and that he built it in such a way that it could function at scale from version 0.1.
Yeah.
And so why the hell are we not doing it?
Yeah,
and it's a valid question culturally.
If I had developed an app and the app was popular, and I mean it was popular, but it still wasn't really turning a profit for me yet. I had a few people on the dev team, and someone said to me, okay, for your next version, like, you must completely rewrite the code from scratch. I mean, I would be a little bit reluctant too, I think.
Sure.
I mean, I might grudgingly accept it, but I'd probably go home and like kick a few sofa cushions and cry.
Sure.
And that kind of thing.
It's difficult, and there's a reason that most businesses fail, and there's a reason that when you meet a great businessman who's been very successful, especially in more than one venture, they deserve respect. Like they really figured out a whole lot of moving parts, and that's something that I really hope is happening behind the scenes with these people who I really genuinely respect in the SV community. But there of course is that temptation for, hey, I can come up with a really cool proof of concept and maybe get Calvin Ayre to kick me some investment money, and then whether or not the thing actually comes to fruition, like, we can blame the fact that, well, the chain isn't mature enough. There's not enough people using BSV for my idea to have come to fruition. I tried my best. And, so there's kind of that opportunity to get funded and then sort of flunk out. And again, that's not a criticism lobbied at anybody in particular, but there are lazy opportunists in every niche. So it's something that I would be very careful of. And I like the fact that people in the SV business community are calling it out and saying, hey, build it right, build it for 1 billion people, because that's what we're actually aiming to work toward. So I think it's generally a good thing. And
if we are indeed at like such an early stage, before most people have even heard of Bitcoin or Bitcoin SV, that maybe this is a good time to completely rewrite everything. Right. Looking back on it, I mean, it's like your kid. It seems like your reality now, and it's tough. But 10, 20 years from now, it's just going to be a blip.
Right. So, absolutely. Yeah. So it's one of those tough things, especially like I said about Calvin Ayre. Like, he's there with a checkbook or a Bitcoin wallet, presumably. But if you
I'm not sure if he wants to say telling everyone that, but yeah.
He's been very open about, hey, if you have a good white paper, I'm willing to pay for things. Right. And that's good. That's the kind of leadership that we need, actually. But it's unfair to him to not take his money and invest it in such a way that is going to create returns over the next, decade or two, or, an entire business cycle of success. And if people are not thinking about the 20-year vision there, then it's more of the same with BTC. It's us all arguing about the smell of unicorn farts, and it's not really.
Well, that's probably the best description of Bitcoin I've ever heard. Yeah. Or at least Bitcoin arguments.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of more to the point of whether it's a good idea to go against what people like Kelvin and Craig are saying online. And it seems pretty clear to me that they're going down the SPV path.
They are, and I think possibly a little sooner than everybody thought. And that's the culture. That's the culture of SV, and I think it's good that it's kind of bubbled up out of the general community, the lower level of wallet developers and just people that are kind of in the business community, saying, hey, this is what Bitcoin means to us. Satoshi's vision is this thing, and if you're not going along with it, if you're just going to be another guy with a node in the middle that I have to trust, then what's the point? That's why we split from ABC. It's really why we split from Core. So we need to treat it like it matters, and our culture does matter.
Yeah, Not just another guy with a node.
Right.
Speaking of which, all right. So I think you're going to cover this a little bit more. I think possibly can we talk about that yet?
I was told to keep all things close to the vest.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well,
yeah.
Stay tuned. I mean, most definitely follow Kurt on Twitter if you don't already. I think pretty much everyone does, but just in case they don't. Follow him. Yeah. And you're yeah, go on.
I was going to say that the SPV conversation will be ongoing.
Yes.
And we're going to we're going to come to consensus about the best way to push SPV out into, everywhere it needs to be.
Yeah, consider this just an introduction. The main event is still to come, and it's going to be a lot more exciting.
Indeed.
So yeah, how did your hand cash giveaway go? Did that turn in, like Bitcoin itself, turn into a much bigger job than you were anticipating?
It's funny, when I did it about maybe a little less than a year ago, I did the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I had the help of everybody's favorite developer, White Rabbit, Amrita Abithi, who I say favorite very solemnly, actually, because the things got contentious with her very quickly. But she was a hell of a developer. She was a software girl. She knew her stuff. And she reached out to me when I did my first one and said, "Hey, I'll just write up a program that'll just ping everyone pennies." And so she kind of took the reins, and we paid, I don't even know, it was like $50 worth of pennies, so everybody could just get pennies if they put their handle on my Twitter, and that was awesome. But this time I did it completely manually, and yeah, it's been a lot of sore thumbs typing in people's handles. And then reminding some people that they're on the old hand cache, and therefore I have to write out, "Hey, you need to upgrade to hand cache 2.0." And then I'm playing tech support. So I've yet to announce the grand prize winner. I said I would announce it Friday, which in the US is tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So somebody will still get one whole BSV, but there will be a random selection once everybody's had the opportunity to enter. So
that's still pretty generous. Probably more with your time than your money in the end. So
yeah, yeah.
Proof of work.
It is, and it's twofold too. On the one hand, I wanted to see what the limitations, if any, that I could discover in hand cache, because you don't really know until you use it, and how many people am I going to test it with. So I figured, okay, let's send out a few hundred transactions and really familiarize myself with the app. I can report 0 bugs, 0 problems. I enjoyed the experience immensely. It's been perfect.
Yeah, on one of my handles, it's working perfectly. The other one, soon.
The other reason is I wanted people to, first of all, know, I wanted to create an incentive for people to upgrade to 2.0, because I genuinely believe it is the best onboarding tool in the BSV space. So I wanted everybody to sort of take that opportunity and understand the wallet themselves. Yeah. And that'll allow them to go to any, person they meet in a restaurant or a bar or a park or, wherever you go, and say, "Hey, download hand cache. Here's $2 or whatever," and go back and forth. So it's just kind of me trying to propagate BSV out into the world by having some fun. And then the other thing that I get out of it is, obviously, I create a little bit of Twitter buzz around myself as Mr. Generous or whatever, but it only cost me the price of one BSV, which is like not even $90. So have a little bit of fun, raise my stakes a little bit in the community. Like, hey, Kurt's a nice guy. Like,
if BSV ever goes to the moon, I'm gonna repost this video and
yeah, right.
Everyone can see you
giving away.
It's only $90.
So
just like my $1,000 keychain.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, creating velocity and all of that is fun, and I actually think that conversation is fun too. Like, I would love to have a $1,000 keychain on my desk in 5 years, because what does that mean? It means we've succeeded, right?
Yeah,
So
to me,
that's,
it feels like $1,000. It gives it extra
sure.
weight.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is $1,000 keychain. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Alrighty then. Well, I guess we're almost hitting an hour here, and I promised you,
Sure.
like, very sincerely, that I wouldn't keep you for longer than an hour. So yeah, please get back to your son. Get back to those feedings, and yeah, thanks for coming on today to talk about this. You're welcome to come here anytime, by the way.
I'm very happy to. Just ping me. I'm up at all hours of the night now. So
That's true.
Need, 10 minutes of commentary here and there, shoot me a message.
Have you ever done a show like with the live feeding, the baby in the bottle under the arm?
I actually have. So I do a weekly private group call with our paid community at cryptotraderspro.com. So we go over fundamentals and market analysis and that kind of thing. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I introduced my clients to little Ronan, and he sat on my chest for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 minutes until he got really fussy, and then my wife kindly took him away. But he has been on a live stream.
Not only is his name Ronan, which puts a bit of pressure on him, I have to say. But yes, his name is Ronan. He's on the blockchain. He is the immutable Ronan baby.
Yeah, he sure is. In fact, and I should give a shout out for anybody to Satoshi Doodles. She made a very nice gift of Ronan. She put the block height at which he was born and drew us up a very nice little doodle, an exclusive Ronan doodle, and it really means a lot. We've got it printed out. And
did you ever show that publicly?
I'm pretty sure I shared it on Twitter. Okay. I'd have to look back, but I have it.
I'll have a look for it. Sure.
I'll dig it up too.
It sounds familiar.
I'd actually like to. Yeah. But it was really nice. So anybody, if you want somebody to do something cool for you, reach out to Satoshi Doodles. She did it as a gift because she was so excited about Ronan's arrival, and really meant a lot. So she deserves a shout out for being so generous and kind and making such a beautiful little piece of art. So it was a lot of fun too.
Thanks, Satoshi Doodles. All right then. Well, I won't touch the whole like can of worms that is Bitcoin parenting and Bitcoin and kids. I mean, maybe that's a topic we can discuss another time.
I like it.
Yeah. Alrighty then. Thanks, Kurt Wuckert Jr.
Yep.
CryptoTradersPro.com.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Join up, follow, listen to him. Maybe you could even win some BSV. Although that's over now, isn't it? Or it will be by the time people watch this.
There's still time to enter.
Oh, really?
I'll accept entries until we give away the whole BSV. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean this isn't live, so I don't know when people are actually going to see it.
Oh, yeah, this is true.
Yeah, so I don't want to disappoint anyone. I don't want people saying like, I followed Kurt Wuckert Jr. on Twitter and I didn't get any BSV, and it's next year or something.
It'll come back. Yeah, we'll do it again.
All right, cool. Catch you later, man.